Sailboat design. That's the focus of this week's Inside Great Lakes Sailing. I'm Greg Norman, your host. Well, on the beginning of the show, you had a chance to see some junior sailors in the Detroit Community Sailing Center and Challenge the Wind program as they put in the water their first build. As a group of junior sailors had the opportunity to put that boat together and sail it. We're going to talk to them about the experience, and I think you're going to find it interesting. And to stay within this realm of boat building, we're going to unveil somebody that you might not know about, but has more effect on sail racing and sailboats in the last 50, 75 years than any single designer. And he did that without a naval architectural degree. And we're, of course, talking about Dick Carter. We're going to get a chance to spend some time talking to him, the 96-year-old out in Cape Cod. And when we get done talking, I think you're going to find out that he was, in fact, the father of modern sailboat design, and certainly has been influential in the sport. And it was a delight to be able to talk to him talking about sailboat design. And we'll get on with it in a couple of seconds. Talking with Harry Jones from the Belle Isle Boathouse, and we're talking with the Challenge the Wind. We're talking about boat design this week on Inside Great Lakes Sailing. Harry, you run Challenge the Wind program in the Detroit Sailing Center, and we got some kids in the background. But explain really what we're doing here.
Yeah, what we're doing here is a project that started in May of this year, early May of this year. The young people behind me, with the help of an instructor, built a boat out of African mahogany wood from some designs of Opti designs that are ages old. They started with basically a pile of wood. The instructor cut out some of the pieces on a CNC machine to get them started. But for 3 days after school in May, from 4:30 to 7, they built this boat, and what we're doing now is putting the finishing touches on it. We had a design contest after they finished building the boat, and they took the design, spread it out amongst the participants, and voted on it, and what they're putting on the boat now is the winning design.
African mahogany, is that something specific that helps with boat building?
And I'm no boat builder and I'm no woodworker,
okay.
So it was all learning.
Suggested,
right?
Okay.
And yeah, that's what the type of marine plywood that's suitable for this type of an application.
Okay. What got you thinking about doing this?
Interestingly, the professor from the University of Michigan started a program called the Detroit River Story Lab, and he saw our program, came over and started talking to us and suggested we might want to think about building a boat, and he would help us from a financial standpoint as well as from organizing people to help us, because he had previously done a river rowboat that was used historically.
Right.
We got a bunch of high schoolers to build that, and he thought it'd be neat, he's a sailor, it'd be neat to build a sailboat. And so he talked me into it. Skillman Foundation helped us out with some of the funding for buying materials and the like, and that got us started.
The program has grown dramatically in the last few years.
Yeah.
This kind of gives them a little skin in the game, so to speak.
Exactly. What we're trying to do, and all of these young people that are building the boat already knew how to sail it, so it wasn't a situation where they're putting something together that they had no idea what the centerboard was and had no idea what the rudder, etc. They understood the boat, and so it was refreshing to see them actually put one together that looks like the boat that they learned to sail on, and then bring it down here and sail it across the river and back without it sinking.
And it didn't sink.
No. it did well. And our program has grown a lot, and this is a part of our program growing. We're looking at creating an education center so we can do year-round programming, and the boat building is going to be a core part of the initial part of it. We're going to start. We started with boat building and showing them how to use small tools, etc. But we also, and this is a part of the Detroit River Story Lab, introduced them to a Detroit's historian and talked to them about the history of the river all the way back to when the French were here. We also had the DNR come over with the Outdoor Adventure Center. They brought a live sturgeon, and as a part of, we'd take a break from building, and the kids would listen to a presentation on restoring the sturgeons in the river. So it's an integrated program of more than just boat building. It's an entire exposing them to the environment in which they'll be using that boat.
Sort of an entire educational capsule, if you will,
Yes.
within that process.
Exactly. Not to mention the STEM element
Right.
of math, science, and technology that's involved in this.
When you talk about this, you smile.
Yeah.
And I say that because we've had a number of conversations over the last 5 years since we started the show. This isn't where you started 5 years ago. This is
no.
dramatically grown.
No, it has. It has. I think when we first talked, we may have had 15 boats. We have 40 boats now. We were doing maybe 20 kids a summer. We do well over 100, and we also add an adult learn to sail program that touches probably another 100.
I say that because at the end of the show, I'm going to give a pitch that you need to send some more money to Harry.
Exactly.
So that's part of the process because they need more boats because we need more kids.
Right, right. Part of what we do is for the young people is we subsidize the amount that they have to pay, and that gets across the high cost of sailing barrier,
Right.
so that we can attract people that otherwise would not get the opportunity to get involved in sailing, and that gets them started. We've had kids go through the program and have talked their parents into buying their own boat, and so now they have their own boat that they can sail on one of the inland lakes. And we have kids that have learned to instruct and have gone through the U.S. sailing level 1 and have come back and helped us instruct. So it's a growing program, and it's a lot of fun to see them grow.
I'm curious as to what the cost are at this point about materials for this boat. I know what a new Opti costs. I'm just curious if you looked at the materials, it's got to be far less than what you built, minus the hours.
Yeah, it's far less, but it's not inexpensive.
Right.
Total materials, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was in the mid four-figure. The wood is very expensive.
Right.
And then there's a lot of little stainless steel bits, and then there's the epoxies and the fiberglass stuff.
Okay. You obviously are working on painting Optimist that you guys built, part of the program. Explain what you're doing at the moment.
Right now, we're just my friend here painted a design, and he made a design, and we're painting it on top of it.
What's the design?
I based the design off of like the ocean and kind of like what it looks like during like a really windy day when the ocean is crazy and like the sun is setting and then there's birds flying.
What do you think your artistic skills?
But my artistic skills,
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty good.
Okay. What does this project mean to you guys? I mean, you started this thing, you're actually getting a chance to build the boat, right?
Yeah.
So it's a boat you're probably going to sail. Now, you guys have had one successful launch already, am I correct?
Yeah.
So you know it floats.
Yep.
So that's pretty much successful, right?
Yeah.
What'd you learn?
I learned that hard work can go a long way. If you stay focused on one thing, you get your job done.
Are you mechanical at all?
I want to be. I want to be like a game developer.
Okay.
Make my own video games and stuff like
Well, that's different with computers than it might be with. I've said this earlier in the interviews. I can't pound a nail straight. Nobody's ever called me a sissy. My point to it is this takes work.
that. Yeah.
A lot more work than you thought.
Yeah, a lot. It started off with just a bunch of wood, and I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't think it was going to float, but it did.
How much do you like sailing?
A lot. This is my second year of the sailing program, the same one, and it's been pretty good.
What makes you happy about sailing?
Well, it's like the windy days, like when the boat is rocking over, and you think about to capsize when you're not, but it's like a roller coaster.
How about you? Talk about the program yourself. What's your thoughts?
On like what it means to me.
Yeah, just you spent a lot of time. How many hours did it take to put this together?
A lot.
Okay.
You know, it was like a really great to like feel a sense of accomplishment when the boat was floating after we finished building the boat, and like patience goes a long way instead of like trying to rush everything. And so I guess that's really what it's taught me, like to be patient more and like just wait and like trust the process.
What do you like about sailing?
What I like about sailing, everything. It's really fun. Tying knots, going out on the water. Especially on windy days when then your boat's tipping over like crazy. It's really fun.
Do you think this is a sport you're going to spend more time doing?
Probably, yeah.
You've been at it 2 years?
3 years. This
3 years?
is my 3rd year.
Okay. What's the one thing you think you've learned the most from sailing?
The one thing I think I learned the most.
It's a hard question. And I asked that question because I'm 70. I've been sailing my whole life, and I still learn every day.
Yeah.
So it's not something new, and it's not something I could give up. Sailing to me is my drug, so to speak. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't know. I've learned a lot of things, but like how to sail was a big part. Learning how to sail, transitioning from like the smaller boats to the big boats is really cool because it's kind of a big change, but once you get used to it, you know, it's more so the same.
Okay. We're talking with Brian Richards, who is one of the fathers of the kids who were building the Opti here for Challenge the Wind, and we're sitting on the rock outside the boathouse. And just to kind of explain what your involvement was, and maybe a little of the satisfaction that comes from what you did.
So my involvement mostly was just kind of oversight, and I was sitting in the background as the children were there, young adults actually, were working on building this new boat project. So I was more or less supporting and assisting the instructor in what he needed, and helping out, kind of making sure everybody was safe first and foremost, and we were doing things right. So it was an incredible experience, I think, for the children in general to be able to not only see like the plans of the ship, but also how those plans translated into the components and how the assembly went, how you had to refine things even though it was cut to a certain size, it still didn't fit together quite perfectly, so you had to do some shaping with some hand planes and some saws and working with epoxy and all the different parts and pieces that go along with that there.
You a mechanical guy?
Pseudo. But
Okay. No, I asked the question because if I had to build, I can't pound a nail straight. That's the reason I'm asking the question.
I can get the job done, but it takes me twice as long as a
Well,
real professional.
as we talked to Harry, this is kind of also helping in the young folks get have a hand in a little more skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the term I used with him, and I think
Yeah.
that's important because they see what goes into it, and maybe you don't trash boats as much because you had to build one.
True. I mean, I myself have never been really a boat person or a water person, but it's been wonderful to me to see my daughter blossoming into this and enjoying being on the water and appreciating how the boats are constructed, because she was with the program last year prior to them building a boat this year. So to see how what they were working with previously is actually constructed, and then being able to sail that as well, to take that out, and so the satisfaction that comes with, hey, I built this, I had a hand in making this happen, and it works.
You guys are obviously painting an Optimist that you guys have built, and I just want what your thoughts are.
I guess it was my first time ever painting a boat, so it was a really cool experience, and the design is really cool. I like how I'm just painting the boat. I guess it's fun.
Madison, how much time did it take, and what was the hard part about building? Were you part of the construction as well?
Yeah, definitely. I have no idea how long it took. It took a lot of hours, a lot of days, and months. Ugh, that was exhausting. But like the hardest part was probably working as a team and like collaborating to build the boat.
Does that help? Did you learn something from that?
I learned more so how to work as a team and with other people, despite how much you just want to punch them sometimes.
I mentioned earlier that you guys had a successful sail across the lake, across the river. That's got to make you feel good that you're not going to sink, right?
Yeah, definitely. You feel like accomplishment because all hard work you put in pays off, and hours of just cutting and sawing down all of that, and then finally see that it all paid off. It feels really good.
Here's a question for all three of you. Do you think when you have to work this hard putting together one boat, that the next time you go out on other boats that this group owns, Challenge the Wind, you think you're going to treat them a little nicer, or maybe get after somebody who isn't treating them as well?
I guess so, yeah.
Is that a lesson?
I guess so, yeah.
Why?
Why?
pretty obvious because you worked your butt off on this one, right? Does it give you pride of ownership to some extent?
Yeah.
Make you feel closer to sailing? What do you like about sailing?
Probably like hiking out like when the boat is about to tip over and then you bring it back up. That's probably one of my favorite parts.
Madison?
I love just the rush of sailing and like all the wind, the turning, and the water. Just being on the water excites me.
How about you?
For me, it's like, when it's really windy, and even on days when it's not windy, you still get the experience to go out, and it might be sunny, and it's just relaxing sometimes. It doesn't even feel rushed. There's different things to sailing, and I think it's just fun overall.
Can I assume you guys are all in the 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade level?
Yeah.
If that being the case, is this something you think you found something it's a lifetime activity?
Lifetime? Maybe not lifetime, but like maybe like a part.
Just another skill set.
Yeah, just like another skill.
What do you want to do when you grow up?
Probably be like an engineer.
Okay.
On technology.
Quite a bit of engineering in this because I'm guessing all the parts didn't go together exactly the way they're supposed to.
Yeah.
Why was that?
So it's okay if
I think sometimes, it's just like error, like measurements not right, but you can learn from your mistakes. Next time we do something better. Maybe we did the whole wrong, or maybe we didn't do something right, but next time we'll do it better. Yeah.
Last question. What was the hardest part of this?
Hardest part? Probably getting the exact measurements right. That was probably the hardest part because we didn't measure in inches. So.
Ooh, what'd you use?
Like we use
metric.
centimeters.
Yeah,
Okay.
metric. Yeah, metrics.
If Jimmy Carter wouldn't have given up on the metric system and when he was president, we might not be in inches and feet now. That's a whole other discussion for another time. For that, you were going to say something when I asked the question. You look like you had.
Oh yeah. No, I was just saying. I think the hardest part for me was like all like hands-on work. Like it's a lot of physical, really physical, and like you're sawing and a lot of that, and and also measurements too. That was pretty tough.
Okay. Madison?
I agree that the measurements were pretty hard, but I think mostly working as a team was the hardest part for me because we all had to speak to each other and sometimes we didn't, and that got our measurements very wrong, or we made things too small, too big, and it didn't fit and it didn't work.
Is collaboration now an asset or a liability?
An asset.
Okay. Did you learn something from working with each other?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can build like trust, with the team.
That's a pretty significant premise,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's part of the. I think that's part of the educational process of what you guys are doing. I would say, I'm looking at this side. You guys have much better waves. I think the much better waves on this side. So if I were going to be a starboard guy, I'd want to sit on this side of the boat because the port side just doesn't look all that good. But I want to thank all you guys for the time you spent. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I want to thank Harry Jones for giving us the opportunity to talk to those fine young folks about building a boat. It's a lifelong lesson. Hopefully they'll be lifelong sailors as well. I hear all the time from people in my generation about the young folks in this world, and maybe it's just a generational argument. And I'm around kids all the time as a coach, but I can tell you, we walk into a boathouse like this and meet these unbelievable young folk. It's pretty amazing. And certainly thanks to their parents for bringing them up the right way. That said, we wanted to thank them all. And again, next to my name on, I guess, this side, never can figure out which way to point. If you have an interest in helping them out, the address is here with the logo. Send them off $5, $10 to give them a hand if you can. We try to raise as much money as we can every year. And it's something I think would be helpful and certainly important to the process. And if you can give them a hand, that would be certainly appreciated. And it was, again, a really fun story to watch. Couple of quick points. Last week, we didn't get a chance to get out to do the Detroit Cup, but Chris Poole, our favorite #1 world match racer who we interviewed last week, won again and beat a very competitive Brian Seago, who is ranked now in the top 25 of the world. He's also a Bayview member from his childhood all the way through now. So we're getting some local guys getting at the national level, and Chris had a great experience here, and it's something that I think will be fun to watch that match tour as they go through. The other mention that I wanted to make is that North Star Sail Club is hosting the J2035s Nationals, North Americans, coming up next weekend, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And we'll be out to catch some of that action and hopefully get a chance to spend some time with the folks at North Star, who are always some of the best folks around. So that's something else we'll be involved in. And up next, you're going to get a chance to talk. We got a chance to talk to Dick Carter who is probably one of the best boat designers, and you don't even know it. And he wrote a book in 2018 called Dick Carter, Yacht Designer. But if you go through some of the stories, it's a really cool interview. You got to remember the gentleman is 96, and we try to kind of point him down onto some things, but it was such a treat to talk to him. And there's things on my own boat that I know that he was responsible for. And to win some national and international races the first time you go out to race in 1965. Well, we'll let Dick get into the subject. So we appreciate his conversation. And the connection to Detroit and the connection locally is that he built North American 40s. And if you're not familiar with Tim Proffitt's Fast Tango, that's a Dick Walker design. And all these years later, still winning races. So off with Dick, and we'll be back with him in just a couple seconds. Once in a while, you get a chance to talk to somebody in sailing that is sort of genius level, and we're getting a chance, the opportunity today to talk to Dick Carter. And if you're not aware of who he is when you get through this conversation, probably one of the most intrinsic sailboat designers, probably in the last 100 years. And I say that because in 1964, he designed a 34-foot boat and went and won the Fastnet. So my question to you is, you went to Yale, you were part of the Corinthian team, you were a national champion, you obviously sailed off of Cape Cod as a kid. How does one get the idea that he wants to compete, goes and designs a boat, and then wins one of the more prestigious awards in the world, around the world? How does that all come about?
Well, it's a complicated story, but I was focused primarily on dinghy racing. And then I kind of got bored with it. I won't go into the detail,
Okay.
but it was my dream to race dinghies in England. I did that. And then later on, I just got bored with, I was too successful in the dinghy racing. So I stopped. And then after a bit, I thought, gosh, it would be nice to have a boat and to go cruising, say. And so I ended up buying a boat that was designed by Bill Tripp, built in Holland. And lo and behold, I started racing the boat. And to make a long story short, I ended up entering the Block Island race sponsored by the Storm Trysail Club. And the race essentially started in Larchmont, went out through the whole of Long Island Sound, around Block Island, and back. And lo and behold, in a fleet of 120 boats, I won the thing. And I won't go into the detail because we'll be here all night talking. but essentially, I identified a new wind coming out of Newport and did what almost nobody had ever done before, sailed through, oh God, now I'm going to forget it, Block Island, the Sound, oh God, I forget the name, direct course, and ended up winning by a mile. And then a couple of weeks later, out of the blue, I received a letter from a Frenchman who owned a sister ship. And out of the blue, he made an offer for me to sail in the upcoming Fastnet race. And he would be pleased if I would skipper the boat. My reaction was, this is ridiculous. I would never loan my boat to a stranger to race in a boat like the Fastnet.
Right.
But to make a long story short, I was persuaded by a neighbor. I was living in an apartment building in Cambridge, Mass at the time. And he was a Dartmouth graduate. And I told him about this offer and that I was turning it down. And he said, "You're crazy." And he said, "You should accept the offer." And he said, "Besides, I would like to go with you. And I've got a friend who's a really good sailor I know would also like to go." So again, there we were on the day of the start of the Fastnet race. And this was 1963. And it was blowing like stink. And I thought, surely nobody's going to start the race with this gale blowing right down the mouth of the start. But I couldn't find any of the Royal Ocean Racing Club officers. And when the gun went, we were there at the start, and it was wild and woolly. And the long and the short of it was that it was a baptism by fire. It was my first real ocean race with all kinds of weather, and particularly on the last leg coming towards Plymouth, where the finish line was, and it was nighttime, and all of a sudden a storm hit us, and the wind began to build, and it would be pitch black. There would be rain squalls. The steering was super difficult. But at any event, we had the extra spinnaker on, an extra large spinnaker, because we could take a penalty to get our rating up. We were a minimum size boat, let me put it that way. And with the extra large spinnaker, I told our American foredeck guy, "Take it down. I can't carry it anymore." And this guy was super in pitch black. Shortly, he came back and said, and I'll never forget these words, "What next?" And I thought, man, without hesitation, I said, "Put up the regular spinnaker," which he did. And it was the toughest steering in my life. The boat, I had, there was one guy, one Frenchman on board. The owner sprained his ankle and couldn't make it, unfortunately. But this young guy sat behind me. And when I pulled the tiller, I would yell out, and he would reach his arms out and pull the tiller that last inch to keep us on track. So, but at any event, we finished as we finished, we could spot the loom of Plymouth first, and then we found the line, crossed, and my neighbor friend who was next door to me said, "Dick, you've got to look behind." And I said, "I can't. I don't want to break my concentration." And he said, "You've got to look." And I said, "I don't want to break my concentration." And they repeated the third time. So I turned, and I could not believe it. There were 4 sets of running lights after, 4 or 5 days of racing. And I was hooked on the Fastnet.
Okay.
But then the owner
Go ahead.
Then the owner met me at Plymouth, and his first question was, how would you improve the steering on the boat? And I didn't know what he was talking about. So he repeated the question, what would you do to improve the steering? And I still didn't know what he was talking about. To me, in the dinghies and everything, the boat was a fixed object. And the whole idea that you could change something wasn't part of my thinking. And the upshot of it was, he said, why don't we form a project together to design a new boat to solve the steering problem? And of course, what he was referring to is, at the time, the rudder was always attached to the keel. And so I went back to Massachusetts with the notion that we were going to design a boat together. But a couple of weeks later, I received a letter from him in which he said, on second thought, I've been wondering whether I should sell my boat or not. And this was his way of saying, forget it. Well, my Dartmouth friend living in the same apartment building, I told him that it's a no-go on the designing with the owner. And he just looked at me and said, why don't you do it?
Okay, so you have the hook of wanting to design your own boat. Is that correct?
Pardon?
You now have the hook in that you want to design your own boat, which is the Rabbit.
Not wanted to, was kind of forced into it.
Okay, so here's my question. In Yale, what is your background, educational background from Yale? Did you have a design background? Are you an engineer?
No, but I took a half course in something called engineering drawing. I didn't know what the heck it was, but it was a drafting course. And as my friend, well, the course stopped when it came to drawing curves. And as one of my friends put it, I went to Yale to learn how to draw a straight line.
All right. So Mike, we talked to Ken Reed a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about sometimes there's just guys that are faster and guys that can see more than others in the world of sailing. You are obviously one of those guys because you built a boat from scratch with not a lot of design background that won the Fastnet the first year. That's amazing.
Well, what it comes down to is I have an ability, which I've discovered, a real ability to see things in my mind.
Okay.
And just recently heard somebody coined this as visual thinking. And so in achieving anything, you have to have a target. You have to have a concept. And my concept was I wanted to do a cruiser racer. In other words, a boat that you could race, but would be outstanding for cruising. And so that was a start. And the other was analyzing the race, the Fastnet race. And what it amounts to, we started in a gale and we finished at night in a storm. But if you analyze the time that we were in the gale and the amount of time we were in the storm, it added up to, from memory, 6% of the total time of the total race.
Okay.
So what are you going to do? Are you going to design the boat for the 6% or the 94%? Simple. I wanted to design a boat that excelled in light, moderate air.
Okay. Question: Who built your boat? You designed them, but who actually built them?
It was a young builder in Holland called Frans Maas, and Ted Hood, a sailmaker that I was doing some consulting for, also had some boats built by this young guy in Holland. So it seemed natural to me to make contact, which I did. I flew over to Holland, met the guy, and told him that I wanted him to build a boat for me. And they said, fine. And I added, I'm going to design it myself. Fine. I said, I would like to put down a deposit for building the boat. And they said, not necessary. And I said, no, I'd like to make a deposit. Not necessary. Then I finally said, look, it's not for you, it's for me. So I paid some money as a deposit for the boat and went back to Cambridge thinking, uh-oh, now I'm committed.
Did winning that first race give you a national, international reputation at that point then?
In retrospect, what I like to refer to it as the winning with Rabbit was a shock. It didn't make sense to anybody. It had to be kind of a fluke. But the following year, and this is where it gets a bit complicated, a Frenchman introduced the 1-ton cup. And the 1-ton cup was a very simple idea. Instead of every entry having a separate rating for rated speed, corrected times, etc., this event would have a rating of 22.0 or less. And it was a brilliant idea in its simplicity. And it caught the imagination of sailors around the world. And the first event preceded my start for the Fastnet in Rabbit. So I entered with Rabbit, even though we were too small, and I got a real taste of it. And I might as well complete the story because the race was held at the mouth of the Seine River at the Havre Yacht Club. And it was a pickup fleet. The initial thing was series with boats that were not designed for the competition. And at the time, the port manager for the US shipping lines had nothing to do. His outfit was on strike. So there were no ships from the shipping line coming to Le Havre. So he had time on his hands, and he became our unofficial manager, if you will, told us where to shop for food and so on and so on. And at the end, of the series where we were about to take off for cows for the start of the Fastnet, he said, "I'd like to have a chat with you before you leave." And I took that by surprise. But the following morning, we met at 10 o'clock. And he said, I would like for you to design a boat for me. And I was shocked because the design of Rabbit for me was going to be a one-off project. You know, I did the Fastnet, my own design, et cetera, never dreaming that I'd win the damn thing. And this was all before the start of the Fastnet. And I was never planning to be a yacht designer, official one. In any event, stalling for time, I said, "Well, what kind of boat would you want?" And he said, "Number one, a boat for cruising with a family." And boy, that registered because I loved that idea. Number two, he said, "I'd like to do an occasional Royal Ocean Racing Club race for fun." Okay. Number three, he said, "I would like to go to Copenhagen in Denmark, where the next 1-ton cup was going to be sailed, because in the initial series, a Danish boat won. Then that gave them the right to host what I call the first real 1-ton cup." And I was shocked when he said go to Denmark. Then number four, he said, "I would be pleased if you would skipper the boat." And I thought, good grief, how could I possibly turn this guy down? At any event, that started me on the road. And this was all before winning the Fastnet with Rabbit. And so it's in dreamland territory. But I was committed right then and there to a second design, which was called Tina. And
You won the Fastnet on Red Rooster.
yes, that was 3 boats out. I did Rabbit, then I did
Tina.
Did Tina, then I did Rabbit 2, where I won. I don't know what. I did extremely well racing on the Solent, and the following year, I designed and built Red Rooster, and we were very successful, and because we won, the New York Yacht Club Cup on the Solent, and ended up winning not just the Fastnet race, but also the Admiral's Cup.
When you win the second Fastnet, obviously you become a name now in the sail design world. People are starting to come to you, and I'm assuming, did you open a company? Did you have? This was on a part-time basis? Was it full-time?
No, what I did was create the model that affected yacht design throughout the world.
Okay.
And it was reinforced by Tina, and Tina was far and away the outstanding boat, despite all the problems I had in Denmark. It was reinforced by winning, or I thought we won, the Britannia Cup in New York Yacht Club on the Solent. It was followed the next year by Red Rooster, where we won the New York Yacht Club Cup on the Solent, and we won the Fastnet, and we're on the winning Admirals Cup, U.S. Admirals Cup team.
What design elements did you bring to the table for all of those boats that were different than they were in the past? Flat bottom?
No. First of all, to solve the steering problem was an obvious one. Don't attach the rudder to the keel and do a separate rudder on a displacement boat. And I was the first one to do this, not to separate the rudder, because Bill Lapworth in California was doing in light displacement. It was an obvious thing to do. But for a medium displacement cruising boat, it was brand new. So the other thing that was new was I was out to prove that a beamy boat could be fast, and that was successful. I changed the rear end of the boat. Instead of the traditional transom, which tilted aft, I did a reverse transom. And when I did reverse transom, I had to flatten out the deck line to make it look right. And then every designer in the world after that did a reverse transom.
Okay.
And so what I was doing, not intentionally, I was describing the ideal boat. And I can recognize any new design today. Reverse transom, beamy, good cruising accommodations, et cetera, et cetera. So I was lucky in timing to change the whole concept of a cruiser racer.
Okay. And obviously the 70s and 80s, that's what they were building. They were building all kinds of cruiser racers.
Yes.
If you think of Tartan and O'Day and you think of all those companies, that was part of that world. They did all those things. It was an interesting time. They called it the golden age of, if I'm not mistaken, the golden age of sail racing.
Yes, because it was so brand new so I came in at the perfect time.
Okay.
Where the whole sport of offshore racing was being developed, but it hadn't really caught on. And when the time came, and this was after Red Rooster, the time came for an international rule. And I was heavily involved in the creation of the international rule. The sport took off absolutely around the world, starting in England, but then there were boats built South Africa, Hong Kong. I actually sailed on a Hong Kong team. There was an explosion worldwide. And
did this become a full-time job? Was this your career at the time?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and I had all kinds of design opportunities, and
was the same guy in Holland that built your first boat still building these other boats?
Yeah. What I did for him was to provide, with the success of Tina, because he was the builder of Tina. There were nine sister ships built, mostly for French owners, because the French press covered the racing in Denmark like no other reporters. The English reporters were so narrow-minded. They were, keeping score of boats and so on. The French press, and I remember one of the key expressions that came about, it was the mouvement exceptionnel in waves. The motion in waves of Tina just captured those reporters' imagination. And it was true. And it took me 50 years to discover why it was a movement exceptional in waves.
Imagine,
I won't go into detail because we'll be here all night.
imagine ego in sail racing. Ego in sail racing is something that was in your time, and it's still around. I get that part.
Well, it's what it is it's putting your life on the line, and in a minor way, but I mean, it's putting your reputation on the line, and
Okay.
but creativity, there's nothing you can do to change the velocity of the wind. There's nothing you can do to change the water and the waves that result. So you're given a very harsh environment in which to optimize performance. And I loved it.
All right. Well, I want to touch on two more boats, one of them local. But what I did want to touch on is that 1972, you were asked to build a boat for a single-handed racer, and you built a 128-footer without an engine. So obviously, it's you know that nobody's cheating. And I don't know how to say it in French. How do you say the term? Verdati? I'm not sure how you say it.
Vendredi 13.
Okay.
That's Friday the 13th in French.
Okay. And it was the biggest at the time. It was the biggest fiberglass boat ever built.
Yeah.
Three masts, correct?
Yes.
Were you still using hood sails in those years?
Yes.
So you must have had a good relationship with Ted.
Oh, I did the marketing for Ted, and was super successful in taking his brand and sales.
Okay. The one thing I wanted to touch on briefly was the North American 40s, which there's some here. Tim Profit is a local Commodore with Bayview, and I know you know Tim because I know you've been on the boat. What was it about the North American 40s, which are very successful boats even today? What was it about the North American 40s that you know? What did you bring to those boats in the design area?
Again, I loved the challenge. What happened was that sailors from Detroit and sailors from Chicago got together and said, and they came up with the idea of, why don't we settle on one design, and then each one of us in Chicago and in Detroit buy the same design, so we can race against one another without handicap. It'll be boat for boat racing. And when I heard this, I thought, oh man, I want to take part in it. So I made contact with a boat builder in Florida, which was under new management. and the marketing guy was also young and imaginative. And I made contact, and I spelled out the concept that we want to build a series of boats. We don't know how many yet. Build a series of boats, and to build them under such strict controls that there will be no argument that my keel is heavier than your keel, or that each keel will be weighed and come in at a precise target. And so we got them to impart controls on the construction of the boat to make them as much as possible equal in all respects. And basically, I won the job to basically supply the boats through the builder, which was called Morgan Yachts at the time. And it just turned out to be a huge success. And over time, because I don't know, I spent 10 years getting out of the boat business, design business, but Tim Profit with, what is it, Last Tango or
Fast Tango.
Fast Tango, turned out to be one of the top sailors in the area and is still winning today.
Yes.
And the other incredible story is when I gave my first talk in England at the Ocean Racing Club, because after a 10-year gap, I re-entered the sailing world and wrote a book, and which was a heck of a challenge. And again, one of these offhand comments, a former designer of mine said, after reuniting, you should write a book. And I thought, oh, brother, another one of these challenges, another one of these tests of character, if you will. But in any event, in that talk in London, the couple of guys came up afterwards and mentioned that they had an NA40. They didn't know how it got to England, but obviously it did get to England and is still sailing today. And but at any event, it was just a big success, and united Chicago and Detroit together, particularly on the Mackinac races. And
yeah, Mr. Carter, when you see a boat like that still winning as a designer, and this boat is obviously like everything else, it's 30, 40, 45 years old, it's got to make you feel pretty good to know the design that you had from back then is still functional.
Not only functional, but looking the same as today's boats.
Right.
Which is just another confirmation that I was lucky when I was a designer, and particularly starting with Rabbit. And when Tina won in Denmark, Tina was a confirmation of the future. And I've got French magazines, one of them that is just the title of Tina. The whole magazine was devoted to Tina and how outstanding it was in Denmark. And it was just, and even today, it looks modern as hell. Or photographs that I had taken or were taken 50 years ago, they don't look old-fashioned at all. They look.
The book you referenced was published in 2018. It's obviously called Dick Carter Yacht Design.
Yeah.
And it's been very well received into the world. Can I use the word savant as it relates to your boat designing? And I say that because you've kind of talked about these unbelievable insights and innovations you brought to sail design, but you don't have any formal training. And the only word I can think of is savant. You just had that ability to do something that nobody else did.
Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. Somebody came up with the expression visual thinker.
Yeah.
And I find today, see, I'm talking with you looking at a screen. I can just barely see the outline of your head, which is another way of saying my eyesight has gone west.
Okay.
But I find I'm going through such a creative period of different projects, and I do it, unfortunately, at the cost of sleep. I go to bed and then I start thinking about things, and then I get excited, and so I lose a lot of sleep, but I can't stop the mind. It's
So it keeps working. No, I get that part. Well, listen, I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. I get a chance to talk to somebody like yourself. It's a real pleasure. You learn a lot. Certainly, as you're talking about some of the innovations you have, I have a racer cruiser from that era. So I know some of the things on my boat were directly related to something that probably came out of your gray matter. And I think that's kind of cool to actually talk to somebody who understands that process. And I have a copy of the book, which is kind of neat. And I just briefly wanted to talk to you. And your wife, Andrea, am I correct on that?
Yes.
I wanted to thank her, and I wanted to thank you for your time. And I hope you have what's a great rest of the week. So thank you very much for your time. And am I missing anything?
Oh, no, I could talk all night, but you asked just the right questions, so I could cover it at high speed, as it were. And but yeah, I'm obviously proud of what I've accomplished, because I was lucky to come in at just the right time when the sport needed an advance in design, and an advance in the thinking of offshore racing. And now it's unbelievable to have a race in the Adriatic, of all places, where there are 1,500 boats on the start line. I mean, the sport has gone crazy. But at any event, enjoyed talking with you, and you asked a lot of great questions. All the best.
Thank you, sir. You have a great time. And thank you very much to your wife as well.
Okay, thank you.
I want to thank Dick Carter, Harry Jones, and all the folks at the Detroit Community Sailing Center. I think it was a great show to learn a little bit about boat building and then see some young folks build a boat. And hopefully they enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed talking to them. So until next time, we will be back soon. Have a great day.